Hi, my name is Lucas and I'm 55 years old. I feel bad saying this confession, but yes, I got the nanny pregnant and I tried to hide it. But today, I'm here to reveal the full secret. I hope I feel better afterward. It all started when my wife gave birth to our son, Rodney. She was always busy with her career, meetings, business trips, the constant hustle, and we needed someone to help us with the day-to-day. That's when we hired Sofia, a young Latina woman who was eager to help. She was sweet, responsible, and a hard worker. At first, I was just grateful to have someone dependable taking care of Rodney when I couldn't be around. And sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more gripping stories like this one. But as time went on, I noticed something. Sofia wasn't just doing her job. She had this way about her that was hard to ignore. She was attentive, patient, and always seemed to be in tune with what Rodney needed. She had this warmth that made the house feel alive, and I couldn't help but appreciate her more and more. Of course, I never thought much about it. She was the nanny and I was her employer, after all. But something shifted one evening when my wife had to leave for an extended business trip. It was just me, Sofia, and Rodney, and I found myself spending more time at home, trying to help with the chores and be around for my son. Sofia and I started talking more. We'd sit together after I put Rodney to bed, sipping wine and talking about everything from our childhoods to our dreams for the future. The more I got to know her, the more I admired her. Her strength, her kindness, her sense of humor. They all drew me in. But it wasn't just that. She had this energy that I hadn't realized I was missing in my life. My marriage with my wife, while loving, felt distant, caught in the routine of everyday responsibilities. Sofia, however, seemed to make the world feel a little bit brighter. One night, after a long day of work and taking care of Rodney, we found ourselves alone, sitting on the couch. The air felt different, charged, heavy with something unspoken. We talked about the pressures of our lives, about loneliness, about longing. And then, without warning, she moved closer. Before I knew it, we were kissing. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I set out to do, but it happened. Her touch was gentle at first, then more urgent, and in that moment, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. I felt guilty, of course, but that didn't stop me. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. She made me feel seen, wanted. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. That night we did it twice. It felt like heaven. A few days later, my wife traveled to Nevada for a business trip. She'd be gone for a week, and I was left alone with Sofia. I knew this was dangerous, but the temptation was overwhelming. I couldn't deny the chemistry between us. Every moment with her felt like a breath of fresh air after suffocating in a relationship that had lost its spark. That evening, as soon as my wife's car pulled out of the driveway, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. I knew this was a chance to explore what had begun, but I also knew that the consequences could be disastrous. The house felt different with just the two of us in it. It wasn't quiet or empty. It was alive, full of possibility. The weight of what we had done before hung in the air like a secret we were both afraid to confront. Sofia, as always, was beautiful, radiant in the way she moved through the house, making it feel warmer. She wore a simple dress, her hair cascading down her back, and as she caught me watching her, she smiled, a knowing smile. I couldn't deny it anymore. There was something real between us. I was falling for her. The excitement I felt was suffocating and exhilarating all at once. We spent the evening talking, just as we always did, but this time, there was a shift in the way we looked at each other. The laughter, the innocent touch of hands, the shared stories. It all seemed to lead to this moment. The tension was palpable. I tried to fight it, tried to remind myself of my marriage and the promises I had made, but I couldn't help it. She made me feel alive in ways I couldn't explain. And then, without a word, she leaned in and kissed me again. This time, there was no hesitation. It was more than just a kiss. It was everything I had been holding back. The guilt I had carried in the past weeks seemed to vanish the moment I let myself fully embrace her. Her lips on mine were like an unspoken invitation to forget everything and live in the now. And for the first time in a long while, I did. She was just a good. Yes, it happened yet again. We didn't speak after that. Words weren't necessary. The connection we shared was too deep for conversation. Our bodies knew what they wanted. The house, once familiar, became a strange, new place. A place where desires were no longer hidden. As the evening wore on, we found ourselves tangled together, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was pretending. But even as I let myself go, even as I gave into the moment, I knew it was wrong. This wasn't just about passion. It was about loneliness, about filling a void that I hadn't realized was so deep. With every touch, every kiss, I knew I was betraying my wife in ways I couldn't undo. Yet, I couldn't stop. In Sofia's arms, I found comfort, a sense of being seen that had been absent for so long. The next morning, as the reality of what had happened settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same. What had begun as a harmless connection had spiraled into something that would change all our lives. I looked at Sofia, her eyes soft and understanding, and realized that I was no longer just playing with fire. I was already burned. As the days passed, the guilt weighed heavier, but so did the desire. I knew I was walking a dangerous path, but in the moment, all I could feel was the connection between us, the urgency to keep going, and the fear of facing the inevitable consequences that would come once my wife returned. Our affair started then, a quiet spark that turned into something much bigger than either of us anticipated. At first, Sofia and I kept it hidden, convincing ourselves that it was just a brief moment of weakness, a connection that was born out of the circumstances we found ourselves in. But deep down, we both knew it was more. I wasn't just lost in the moment, I was falling for her. And, despite her own misgivings, she seemed to feel the same. Sofia was young, vibrant, and full of life, a stark contrast to the routine I had grown accustomed to in my marriage. My wife was always busy, focused on her career, constantly traveling for work. I understood her dedication, and I admired it, but it also created an emotional distance between us. My conversations with Sofia, our shared moments, felt like a refreshing breath of air in an otherwise stifling existence. It wasn't that I didn't love my wife. It was that I had grown numb, disconnected, and somewhere in that void, Sofia slipped in. We kept the affair secret, of course. We both understood the risks involved. The guilt was there from the start, but it was always overshadowed by the intensity of what we shared. The first time our eyes locked with more than just platonic interest, I felt a jolt of something I hadn't felt in years. Her touch lingered longer than it should have, her words softer. It started innocently enough, casual compliments about each other's day, occasional moments when our hands brushed, but it didn't stay innocent for long. Days turned into weeks, and our relationship grew stronger. Every stolen moment, those brief windows of time when I was alone with her, became more frequent, more intense. The house was quiet when my wife was away, and it was in those empty spaces that Sofia and I built our secret world. We'd talk, laugh, and share things that neither of us had shared with anyone else. Our conversations went deeper with every passing day, and I realized how much I had been missing out on, how much I had been denying myself. I tried to convince myself that it was just temporary, a fleeting connection that would fade as quickly as it had started. But that's not how things work, is it? In reality, the more I told myself it was just an affair, the more I started to feel something real, something profound. I was falling for her, and I couldn't stop myself. It wasn't just the thrill of the secrecy, the adrenaline of the forbidden. It was her, the way she made me feel seen, wanted, alive. And yet, I couldn't forget my wife. Every time I looked at Sofia, the guilt crept in. I wasn't just cheating. I was betraying the woman who had built a life with me, who had given me Rodney. How could I look her in the eyes when I was lying to her? And how could I look at Sofia and pretend this was nothing more than a temporary affair? It was a tangled mess I couldn't untangle. Then came the moment I will never forget. Sofia sat me down, her face pale, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart stopped. For a moment, the room felt like it was spinning. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, and I was left trying to catch my breath. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for a child, not like this. My first instinct was to panic, to run, to find a way out. But I couldn't. I looked at her, and despite the turmoil inside me, I couldn't bring myself to abandon her. I had a responsibility now. A life was growing inside her, a life that was undeniably mine. "I'll take care of this," I told her. "Keep the baby. I'll figure it out. I'll find a way for us to be together." In that moment, I convinced myself that I could balance both lives, that I could somehow make this work without anyone being hurt. I was so wrong. The guilt was unbearable, but I shoved it aside, promising myself that I would handle it later. I told myself that I would figure out how to tell my wife, how to navigate this new reality. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew the truth. There was no easy way to make it right. Looking back now, I see how much of a mess I made. I hurt my wife, I hurt Sofia, and I hurt myself. Rodney, my son, would grow up in a world that wasn't as perfect as I had imagined it to be. The ideal life I thought I had was shattered, and I had done it all. Sofia and I tried to make it work for a while, but the guilt, the shame, the lies, it all built up, and eventually, I had to face the truth. I couldn't keep pretending. My marriage, my life, had already fallen apart, and the consequences of my actions had already begun to unfold. But now, I am here, confessing it all, trying to make sense of the decisions I made, the lives I affected. Maybe I'll feel better after saying it out loud, or maybe the guilt will always follow me. But I know one thing for sure. Nothing can undo the past, and I'll have to live with it for the rest of my life. I share this story not to justify what I did, but to show that the consequences of our actions are real and lasting. If you've ever been in a situation like this, or if this story resonated with you, please drop your thoughts in the comments. How would you have handled the same situation? I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed this confession, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more stories like this one. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more.